Hi, welcome to Beadwork's Tips and Techniques video series. I'm Melinda Barta, editor of Beadwork, and today I'll be sharing with you some valuable information about beading. Let's get started. Today I'll share with you 5 must-know basic terms for reading beading patterns. The first term is called culling your beads. No beads are perfect. Even with the larger pressed glass beads like these, sometimes you may find that they are irregularly colored or they have chips, and you want to make sure to eliminate those beads before you start your project. When working with seed beads, you'll find that check glass beads, often found on a hank like this, are more irregular than Japanese seed beads. So you can either sort through your beads and eliminate the irregular ones before you start, or if you're like me, I just make a pile of beads and select only the best ones and the most evenly shaped ones as I stitch. The second term is one that I feel is the most important, especially when you are working patterns at a Beadwork magazine. And that is pass through versus pass back through. And both of these refer to the direction of your needle. So first we will start with pass through. I'll pick up just a few beads here and notice that when I pass through the beads again, it's in the same direction that the beads were strung. So that when you pull the thread tight, you form a loop with the beads. So the second term you will need to know is pass back through. So here I will pick up a few beads and I'm going to pass the needle back through the beads in the opposite direction of which they were originally strung. Now watch what happens when I pull that needle and thread through. All of the beads fall off. However, sometimes it's important to use pass back through, because here I'll show you how to use it when working a fringe. So again, I'm going to pass the needle back through the beads in the opposite direction they were strung, but this time I'm going to skip the last bead strung and pass back through the second to last bead and the following beads. And notice that when I pull that through, the bead at the tip acts as a stopper. And there you have formed a fringe. Moving on to the third term is that every beader should know the difference between a round and a row. Rows of beadwork are worked back and forth, as seen in this square stitch cuff. You simply stitch across a row, and once you get to the end, you'll turn around and work across the row in the other direction. And you'll simply do that back and forth motion all the way across the project. However, a round is used for circular and tubular stitches. This cuff here was made by working circular rings of peyote stitch and then joining them together. So in working a round, just as the name suggests, you're working around and around as you stitch. There's no turning around at the end of a row like we did with this other cuff. And here's an example of a tubular stitch. These are herringbone bead caps, and they are worked by going around and around. Your project instructions will often call for you to use waxed or conditioned thread, and this simply means to use pre-treated thread. You can either use beeswax that's available at craft stores and bead stores, or you can use a synthetic conditioner called thread conditioner. To do so, you just take a length of thread, press it down into the wax or conditioner, pull your thread across, and I like to do this twice when I'm working with nylon thread. And if you'd like, you can just run the thread through your fingers again to kind of help smooth it out. I think conditioning your thread is especially important when you're using nylon thread, like the type you find on small spools, but it's also helpful when working with other larger spools of thread that often contain fishing line. The final term, tension, refers to the tightness of the thread that holds the beads together. When a pattern calls for you to work with tight tension, you simply pull firmly on the thread after adding the beads. If a pattern asks you to work with loose tension, you just want to make sure that the loop of the beads you just added has some flexibility to it. Working with too loose a tension will leave the thread exposed and the beads will be able to slide around on the thread. The reason why you sometimes want to work with loose tension is that a pattern may call for you to pass through the beads several more times, and those later passes will firm up the beadwork. The only drawbacks to working with too tight of tension is that you can sometimes break your thread by pulling it across the edge of a sharp bead, or sometimes what will happen to me after hours of beading, if I'm constantly pulling on that thread, especially a synthetic thread, it can actually cut the sides of my fingers.